So again, I'm your host. I'm Vincent Valderrama. I'm the Director of Engineering at Smart Design, and I'm joined today by three design and innovation leaders in their fields. I'm going to go over here, so I'll list in the order. But we have, I know all these people, so I don't know why I'm reading this, but Brett and Dan actually worked together for quite a few years, but I'm still going to read this. Brett Andler, co-founder of Sigma, Dan Connors, engineering manager at Casper, and Christina Perla, co-founder and CEO of Make Labs. Welcome, guys. At this point, I'm going to move my chair forward. All right, cool. So with that said, I am going to have you guys introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about what you're working on.
Yeah, that sounds great. Hey everybody, I'm Brett. I started my career designing vacuum cleaners for a company called Shark. Then, as Mitch had mentioned, spent a couple of years here, and then spent a while at Square designing credit card readers. Kind of across all of those, came across similar pain points that I wanted to solve. And so most recently have founded Sigma. I really like going with those short S-name companies. And yeah, so we're building software tools to make the hardware development process easier for folks.
I'm Dan Connors. I'm an engineering manager at Casper. On the screen is not something I'm working on currently. It is something that I worked on here with the team at Smart. Well, I guess not here, but in the old office. And I just really like developing good products. And I think working with the team at Smart has always been a pleasure. And I'm very proud of the Nest booster seat you see here, which I worked on with Vince.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina, co-founder and CEO of Make Lab. My background is in ID. I graduated from Pratt 10 years ago. I hope I'm not aging. I'm dating myself. Worked at Interwoven for a little bit, worked at Converse for a little bit, and ultimately kind of spun out my own thing with Manny. We 3D print parts, prototypes, and production runs for a lot of hardware and consumer product businesses. Yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, guys. So just a note, please leave all questions to the end. This session is being recorded, and we'll have a link on our website in about a week or so. So yeah, let's begin. So basically the format here is we're going to try to cover 3 topics, and we'll have 2 to 3 questions per topic, and we'll see how that goes. I think our time here is probably around 40 minutes or so. So we might not be able to get to everything, but hopefully it will be a fruitful discussion. So the first topic is democratizing design with the latest prototyping tools. So this one's really about accessibility and affordability of these tools. So the question is, how has the cost and complexity of 3D printers and additive manufacturing services impacted the accessibility of design and manufacturing capabilities for individuals and small businesses? Christina, I think this one's right up your alley.
I was gonna say, I'll take this first one, it's very right at home for me. It's interesting. I think it's awesome. And so I think it's really, really cool that these tools that, the act of making, the act of manufacturing, all that stuff used to be widely inaccessible, and now it's not. But at the same time, you really have to understand, because of the cost, what are you sacrificing in terms of quality? Those are factors to consider. So to go into, the world of making on your own with, for example, like under $500 printers, you really have to think, what are you getting in return? And you really have to understand the narrative that 3D printing is magical, prototyping is magical, but you might not get, the part quality that's going to bring you all the way to injection molding. So I like
I'm going to follow up. Do you think that's changing? Because I know over the last couple of years, that quality has increased from like the lower end hobbyist printers, where now you are seeing kind of better, at least user experience, as far as not having to, level a bed or deal with a lot of malfunctions. Things seem to work a bit better with the latest machines. Do you think that's going to continually improve, where you get to a point where, at the lower cost, you are getting kind of what you need or what is promised?
Always, yes. Like, when we started Make Lab, we still had 3 thumb screws on the bottom of a bed that we had to somehow level out to 4 points. It was ridiculous. We spent so much time just unclogging things, making sure the first layer was good. I wish I had a bamboo or a fuchsia. But at the same time, you have to think about how each technology plays its part in your prototyping journey. FDM might only bring you so far. You might want to upgrade to SLA, powder, metals at that point. So, while FDM might be getting better, it's still not the solve for everything, is what I like to say.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel like understanding the job that you're trying to complete and finding the appropriate tool for that is a super valuable part of the process. And it's like understanding when to use what, basically. And sometimes I think that means I need something quick and I need the version that is printed at home. And sometimes it's like, no, I need a little higher fidelity, and it's worth it to go to a shop. It's worth it to go to a partner.
I think even in the most advanced examples too, what you're seeing is companies maybe saving time. A printed part might be a test tool rather than a finished product. And I think it's less about kind of production than it is about testing.
Yeah, I think that there is a distinction to my question that I think evolved from last week, where the focus was on these printers that kind of are more readily available to anyone, really, anyone with a credit card or some cash. But I do think that another distinction is what you do, Christina, at Make Labs, and it's the services, right?
Yeah.
Like, when I started my career, there weren't too many options I had as far as getting external prints made, and when that was happening, they were going to be extremely expensive. Now there's so many different places you can go to get very specific items, and some of them specialize in specific industries, and that's also having an impact on how we work.
I mean, lower cost printers means that we have more capacity, and if they're easier to use, that means we can focus on the experience, right? And we can focus on the service. We can focus on the DFAM, like making sure that our clients' prints are good and useful.
Cool. I'm going to move on to the next question. So, kind of in line with 3D printing, this question is around materials revolution and how we can now build in different materials. So, with an expanding range of printable materials like bioplastics, metals, and composites, how will this influence design possibilities and the functionality of products?
I could get started again. It's interesting. I go to a bunch of these additive manufacturing conferences, and so much of them are focused on production and production level capabilities. And there's this constant conversation about reliability, standardization, repeatability. So, all this to say, if you print 1,000 parts in the same machine, different days, same material, same setting, same everything, will you get 1,000 of all the same parts? And still, the answer is mostly no. There's still a lot of deviations. There's still a lot of variabilities. So if you're thinking about like materials in that sense, we're still working on it. The whole industry is still working on it. But if you're thinking about it for prototypes, then a lot more becomes possible, because then you don't need materials that need to function forever, that need to be chemical resistant, UV resistant, super tight tolerances compared to like injection molding, blow molding, or traditional manufacturing, even CNC. But there is still also this play between technologies and materials. Like, we have this great technology called VCJ. It's from a company called Inkbit. I don't mean to like market and sell here, but it's a great example that I actually just spoke to the CEO about. Great precision, great technology, but the materials are only as good as, only good for prototyping because of the way that parts are manufactured. It really limits materials. So while the technology is great, the materials are okay. So you're gonna find that play. Like, FDM materials can be great. You can throw them out on the field. You can do, an ASA is UV resistant, which is great. Many materials are not, but then you get FDM quality. So it's this play between technology and materials you always have to be mindful of. But I mean, in general, like, the industry has made strides.
I'd also say that there's we see a lot of material makers, companies that are making these really kind of promote the use of their materials, kind of saying that they'll mimic a real molded material like a TPE or a silicone, and I think the promise isn't quite there. Like, we still don't really see that happening, and I think once hopefully the chemistry makes sense and we do, that'll have more of an impact.
I'm also curious, can I jump in here? And
of course.
I'm curious how you guys think about, because I guess we're all mechanically, I'm going to count as mechanical for this purpose, but like I think that this becomes an interesting question also when you broaden this outside of just 3D printing and start talking about other kind of rapid prototyping tools that get people to experiment and explore things much, much faster than you used to be able to. So like certainly Arduinos have been around for 10, 15 years, whatever, things of that ilk, but then I think there's a whole new generation coming after that also aids so that like not only can you prototype your mechanical experience faster, but you can prototype your digital experience and electromechanical experience faster.
I think one other interesting application is like the bottleneck to me seems to be CAD, right? Not everyone has a lot of CAD skills, and so the files you're printing have to come from somewhere. But I think 3D scanning is like a really neat opportunity. I know there's a company that can do like body scans just from 2D photographs that could be used for fitting clothes or designing mattresses, as the case may be. And so like I think finding ways to short circuit that input are another really great opportunity to kind of broaden the usage of 3D printing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, that the learning curve to spend whatever 5-10 years learning CAD to a degree where you can get it to do what you want is super challenging, and like ways to cut that out of the loop are very helpful.
Yeah, I have a neighbor who's, is kind of your typical 3D printing hobbyist, and I was asking him the other day kind of like, what does he use it for, and what does he do? And he spent a whole section of our conversation talking about the difficulties of various CAD packages and like how it used to be you couldn't change anything, and that was like one of the big bottlenecks for him. So like it's really great to see. I think he said he switched to Onshape recently, and like that really opened things up for him.
And I guess also cost there. It like buying Creo is whatever, a couple $1,000s. It's like it's not practical if what you're trying to do is like print a little toy figurine once or something.
Yeah, he was making like phone holders for his Peloton. Like that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's also the subset of people that aren't even thinking about doing their own design work. I know, I mentioned my daughter has a 3D printing club at school, and she's in, what grade is she in? Like 6th grade, sorry. She's in 6th grade, and they don't have any CAD or anything. It's more about like going on Thingiverse or MakerWorld and getting things to then print and use. And that's something that I think is also interesting about how we use these machines. Cool, I'm gonna move on to the next question. Okay, so last question on this topic. 3D printing allows for on-demand mass customization. How will this impact mass production models and the relationship between designers and consumers?
I'm trying to think. The thing that comes to mind for me here is less 3D printing inherently, but more, I've seen like a range of different customizations happening. Like the thing that immediately comes to mind is like Apple AirPods and being able to like engrave it with whatever emoji or whatever name you want. And just the idea of like having a formalized manufacturing process, like an assembly line that ends instead of in the same way every time, having something that can splinter at the end and give you that customization option, I think is promising and interesting. And I think that we're going to see more of it over time.
I think too about manufacturing jigs. If you think about a mold and you think about a form factor or a personalization, like a name or a company name or something, you can now, with additive, you can now engineer the tooling to have inserts that you put in last minute and change at a certain point of the manufacturing process. And so, I think the question really prompts and this thought of, can I just 3D print customized objects? But I think what's really interesting is like, what can you do in the menu? Like, how can additive help the manufacturing process to make end use, parts or products with additive in the mix?
Yeah, it's a really cool thought. Just the idea that you can mix mass production techniques like injection molding, but then be able to swap in one little I haven't spent any time thinking about that, but I enjoyed it.
Jigs.
Cool.
Sorry, guys. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and switch gears to the next topic, and also being a little bit mindful of time here. The next topic is democratizing design and its impact on the traditional product development process. So the first question is, how will the proliferation of user-friendly design tools affect the role of professional designers in product development?
I kind of think it won't. I mean, I think the big thing there is looking at these as tools, right, for communication. I think the operative example for me is the angled measuring cup, which is a flagship OXO product, which came from an inventor submission, and presumably one having seen several similar submissions that didn't involve CAD at all. And so, like, I think you can communicate an idea simply enough without it, but it can only be a good thing for the inventor to communicate more finitely with these kind of tools.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said about just giving people options for how they communicate. I'm a horrid sketch artist, and so like CAD to me is my way of being able to communicate visually. And I think the easier it gets and where you can lower that barrier to entry, where you don't need an engineering degree and years of experience, only means more opportunity for more folks.
I'll even do CAD before I do sketching. I'm the same way. Like when I was I was mocking up like custom boxes and packaging, for example, and that's something I could easily do in by hand. Like I know how to sketch. I went to Pratt, but like I'm not a natural sketcher, so I took to CAD. But because like Onshape was so available and I have a Mac, it was so easy. I did that in like 3 minutes. It was great.
Yeah, I think I would echo what Brett said as well, as far as accessibility only being, I'm sorry, I think that's actually what Dan said, but I think we all believe it, only being good for professionals, and thinking about it in a kind of grander scheme where if I had access to these tools and still was meant to end up being a professional, I would have known so much more sooner. It's kind of the 10,000 hour rules, and it's going back to my daughter being exposed to 3D printing so early and being exposed to CAD so early. It's only going to mean that she or whoever is exposed to those things early will only be better at that tool like sooner in life.
And to kind of, to draft off what Brett said earlier, I think when you move outside of CAD and 3D printing, it only gets more open. I think whatever little coding I've learned in my career came from finding people doing things similar to what I wanted and kind of tinkering and hacking. And I think that learning how to learn in that way is just incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think there's also actually an element of, we talked about this with the like starting with Thingiverse and things where it's just like, here's a model, go print it. But then it's not that far of a leap from there to say like, here's a model, but I want to put my name on it first. And like that, then you kind of get this little baby step into, I want to modify and make my own thing. And I think that to your point, if you start that at 5, your outcomes are just going to be significantly better when you're, whatever, 20.
Yeah, did you guys know they call those remixes? I learned this recently, like on Thingiverse. If they find a model and then they want to make their own edits to it, then they might repost it to the community, and then it's just like remix of the other, which I think is kind of cool in a dorky way. Cool, moving on to the next question. So this one's a toughie. These first, 6 questions were kind of softballs, but this one you'll have to think a bit about. So how can we ensure high quality design standards and product safety how can we ensure high quality design standards and product safety without hindering accessibility?
This might be a hot take. I don't even know if I agree with my own point that I'm about to make, but I'm going to make it anyways. Let's go. But does the market do that for you? And like bad products don't get sold, and good products that are thoughtfully designed and don't injure people are the kinds of things that sell and expand, and like the companies go out of business, for lack of a better word, that design poorly.
Amazon reviews, like you get so much good input from that like, I don't know, if you make a bad product, it's kind of sunk if it doesn't hit there.
Yeah, that's not to say that I'm encouraging people to design bad, unsafe products, but I would hope that to a degree natural market forces combined with like your standard certifications that are just required in order to launch a product and get it through customs and things like that, hopefully help here.
I'm also curious to, because I would think that Amazon and Etsy are where this would happen most, right? And so I'm curious as, what they see as a marketplace, if there are regulations for certain types of products. I know that Amazon, like trying to get a product, dropped to a warehouse, there's this whole thing you have to go through. It's actually kind of crazy. I recently tried for some filament. Oh my gosh, still have not successfully done it, by the way. Still on my to-do list. But I'm curious more maybe about Etsy and how they kind of handle this, because that's where I see more of the wild, wild west, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess that brings up an interesting point that there's also this concept of content curation. And stores used to very much do this where you need to work with a buyer and convince a buyer that their shelf space is worthy of, or that your product is worthy of their shelf space. Certainly that looks a little different in the digital era, but I think that it still broadly exists, and products that sell better get better placement.
Yeah, I also think that this ties back to some of the other things that we're talking about, where tools have become accessible and they kind of outpace education, right? So I think there is this thought around making sure that we provide design education early, just like we're providing 3D printers early. We're teaching people how they can make things, but that doesn't mean that we can also teach them what it means to make something safe or to have design standards that make sense.
It's kind of parallel to the question of what you were saying earlier about knowing what you're using 3D printing for. Yeah. I think as designers, we know what you're getting. The question, I guess, is do consumers, if you're going to buy something that isn't obviously an injection molded part or whatever?
I would say no.
I would too.
Cool. Next question. How can design software, so we almost started talking about this before, but we can go a little deeper here. How can design software integrate more seamlessly with manufacturing processes, including 3D printing and CNC machining?
DFAM. Tell me what will print and what will not. Straight up. I could use that.
I feel like CAD always has the Control P print feature, and that's just not how you print parts. It's that's been the dream of CAD software for as long as I've known it, and it just isn't realistic as of now. I would love for it to be. It should be. This should all be 3D printing should be as easy as 2D printing, but unfortunately, that's not quite how it works.
I don't really know why it's not. Maybe naive question, but it doesn't feel like it would be that hard. It doesn't feel like the programs that when you export something, what you're importing it into is all that more advanced.
Yeah, I think that if you look at legacy CAD software, all of it does a really good job of trying to sell you other modules that are more traditional in nature, right? So CNC is more traditional. So if you're going to get, Fusion, then you can have the extension that includes that. If you get Creo, there's an extension for CNC, and that doesn't really exist for this new wave of the way we make things. And you're right, there's no reason for that not to happen. So I'm banking on that occurring hopefully soon. I've been waiting for many years. What's
interesting is 2 or 3 years 3 years ago at this point, we were pitching VCs and we were trying to get funding, and that was actually one of the things that we were pitching. And we spoke to SolidWorks, we spoke to Dassault, we spoke to Onshape, and all of them said that it was a lot more complicated than it looked because of various reasons. Either it was materials matching, getting prices quickly was not the issue, but it was capacity as well. I don't know, for some reason, it was just the development of it was really difficult. But then that leads me to the question of why are you trying to put a whole instant quoter with all these options on one interface when the Onshape interface is used only for a specific subset of clients that would likely use a subset of options. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
You got me going.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in that space, so we need to get someone from those companies here. Cool. I'm going to go on to the next question. So this actually moves into a third topic. So the third topic, and the final topic actually, so we have 2 more questions left. This is democratizing design and its potential environmental and social impact of that. So how can democratizing design contribute to a circular economy through design for disassembly, repair, and upcycling.
I'm going to hop on that one because I have an example that I think is really valuable in highlighting where we are and aren't, or where we could go. I found a fan on my block that someone was throwing out, and I took a look at it and figured out that it wasn't broken in a way that I couldn't fix, because all that was wrong was the knob was broken. And I have access to CAD, I had access to a 3D printer, took some measurements, whipped up some CAD, nothing that would be worthy of designers here, but in a day I had a working fan, and that's a fan I didn't need to buy. And that would otherwise have been in a landfill. And so I think if we get ourselves to a place where we can have access to either the CAD or the wherewithal to make it, we can prevent a lot of waste. And I think that's one of the more hopeful ways of looking at all this.
Oh, you can go. Okay, I'm going to take this in a weird direction, but so I just found out about this thing because of the right to repair legislation that's come out recently. Even Apple now has a thing where you can go to this website and they will ship you all of the equipment you need to repair your own screen, not even take it to a repair shop or not even take it to an authorized Apple place. But I thought that was super interesting and plays to that same general question of maybe we're not so far off from a world where never in a million years would I expect Apple to be the place leading something like right to repair, but maybe it's not so wild that you can get a CAD file for one particular part and then just make that part for yourself.
I was going to say, taking it more to an industrial level as well, you're seeing a consolidation of parts in a complex assembly because of additive. That's so cool, and I'm wondering if because these tools, both on the software side and design side and the making side and the rapid prototyping side, are more available to professionals, you have more opportunity to explore those things to design more sustainability into products as well. That's another way of looking at it that I find interesting. I've seen a little bit here and there. And then you have less tooling, you have less energy usage, you have less manufacturing all around because of the consolidation of parts. I think that's pretty cool.
A thing you just made me think of is there's also the shipping footprint. So if you're manufacturing something, in particular a big bulky item with a ton of airspace, then needing to fly that from China or boat that from China versus having it made locally, I assume there's a meaningful carbon footprint difference there as well.
And to take the 2D printing example, how nice would it be if you could just go to your public library and print a part the way you would print a PDF? That to me is really, I think, the promise, more so than industrial production.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily means that, there wouldn't be any service industry out there. This reminds me of my laundry machine that recently broke, and a service person had to come out to repair it. And I think what made sense was the cost to pay for the labor, and obviously that makes sense. But what didn't make sense is the cost for the part. Because it was a rare part, because it's something that doesn't get repaired that often, it was 2 weeks wait plus several $100s for this part that could have been handled at a public library potentially. He'd still do the installation, I'm sure, but yeah, that's interesting.
I was also thinking about MakeLab in our own business. I get the question so often, this year and maybe a little bit of last year when Bamboo came out, oh my gosh, are you guys going to switch all of your printers over to Bamboo? And this question made me think of a really solid answer. We use Prussias, and so much of the machine is actually 3D printed. So when a machine breaks down, that machine's down for a day? I don't have to wait for parts. All the files are available online. So as a business, it's super useful for me to be able to just print the parts of the machine that we need, even print them in advance and have them in stock. So I create my own inventory that we can just pull from.
I feel like, Brett, you want to talk about the space station.
I always want to talk about space
Oh,
stations. Yeah, I was just going to, the idea that while it might not always make sense here on Earth to to print a fan knob if you're not a mechanical engineer who owns if you're buying an $800 3D printer to just prevent you from buying a $10 fan, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But where it makes a lot more sense is when you start looking at things like 3D printing in space that I get all jazzed about, just because it's this idea that like the cost to ship things into space is incredibly high. So you can't just have backup parts of every imaginable part on the space station, but if you can have one backup printer and files for all of these things, suddenly it becomes a very interesting kind of trade-off.
Cool, awesome. And I think this is crazy, but we're up to the last question here. We are gonna take questions from the audience after this, so start thinking about those. But on this last question, and it's funny that you bring up the public library because I feel like that's a great answer to this question. How can accessible design tools empower communities to develop products that address local, environmental, and social challenges?
I mean, I think the pessimistic answer is that this is also hard because it's hard to make money off of spare parts. But you know, if the library doesn't need to turn a profit. So I think that's my utopian vision of all this, is that it's publicly owned and publicly managed.
Here I am advocating for like survival of the fittest, raw capitalism, and you're like, you know, utopian. I agree with your worldview. But
Any other thoughts on this last one?
It's kind of like open sourcing existing problems, right? It's opening it up. I mean, then we go back to the previous question was like, of like, you know, do we create safety concerns? Like, do we actually create other issues by doing this? But I think maybe not as much in the recent years, but in the past, there's been such a backlog or a stuckness of like ideas and good inventive ideas that actually solve problems. So I think the availability and accessibility of all these tools, if anything, just spurs innovation faster. It'll inspire the right people. It'll inspire everybody. You know, the ones who are really serious, they'll get weeded out, or weeded in, or you know, whatever. You know what I mean? And I think all in all, it's a really good thing, and especially because these things are being introduced earlier in STEM education, or STEAM. I don't know what the proper terminology is these days. It always changes. But I think all in all, it's really cool.
Awesome. All right, well, that's it for the questions that we have prepared here. So we're gonna go ahead and have John, our Executive Director of Technology, take this microphone around to anybody in the audience who might have a question for our panel. Any questions?
Hey guys, I think I know
Hey, Ed.
most of you up there. So you guys mentioned about CAD being a bottleneck. I've noticed this with neighbors as well who have bought 3D printers for their kids, can't really do anything. Have you guys experimented with any of the text to CAD AI generated tools that are out there? And do you guys have an opinion about them, where they're gonna go?
I haven't, but I'm very curious. It's been on my to-do list, and I just haven't done it.
Yeah, I haven't either. It sounds really fun, but I think we go back to the safety question, of course.
I think I've seen a couple of videos of it a few months ago, and it still looked, and the feedback I saw like on LinkedIn was that it was still pretty preliminary. Like, you can do basic stuff like shapes, vases, maybe, like simple extrusions or you know, rotate type of commands. But I don't know, what is the workflow for a professional designer that wants to make a functional part? I'm curious. Does the AI bring it to a certain point and then you go in and edit? These are just the questions floating around in my head.
Yeah, I think AI has a place in the space, and I've also not played with it. I think some people on our team have, but we probably will look at it quite a bit more because it's just interesting, more so that we want to like apply that right away. But I think there are probably other aspects of AI that will answer a lot of the things that we talked about today. So for instance, imagine designing a product and not necessarily being a professional, not knowing whether or not you meet the requirements or the standards or the regulations of your locality. You can take that and feed it to an AI model that will tell you whether or not you have a small part or whether or not you need to check for certain standards. And that's really cool. That's really interesting, and I think that's something that I want to see more of.
It's funny, that's one of the things that we've been playing around with at Sigma.
Cool.
Any other questions?
So we have a class of Pratt students in the audience, and it's very inspiring to see you here. Thank you so much. I have a simple question that I have for each of you, all 4 of you. Curious what advice, again, it's a simple question. I think it's a really important answer for all the students, all the young people in the audience to hear. What do you wish you did or knew your first couple years into your career? I mean, think of how much has changed since then, the amount of advances in technology, the way that you collaborate with peers, the way you manage clients, the way you communicate with clients. Yeah, if you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self?
I can start. I've been fortunate enough to have a career that got me here. So it's hard for me to answer that question because I'm not sure, and not to say that I haven't made mistakes or wouldn't do anything differently, but I think I could answer it better by telling you what I tell a lot of young designers and engineers, especially engineers. So maybe this is outside of the group that's here, but you know, being here at a consultancy, we have a lot of junior engineers that start as interns and grow up here at Smart Design in the consultancy world. And that's great, and we love them, and they do great work, and they learn quickly and adapt, and are able to apply and can be really successful. What they don't get, though, is hands-on experience, you know, on a factory floor. And as an engineer, that was something for myself that was really important. And if I didn't get that opportunity, I don't know if I would be doing what I'm doing right now 20 years later, basically. So that is something, while it's like, it's hard to wish for someone not to take a job, sometimes my recommendation is, you know, get out there. If you have 2 job offers on the table and one of them is going to take you around the world and have you see your products be made, then potentially that's kind of a better start for you. So that's my answer.
I was going to say, maybe not that specifically, but I feel like design school leaves you with such a small view of what you're actually involved in, right? You're involved in a whole industry or a variety of industries. And I feel like in design school, you're not exposed to that. You're exposed to the making. You're exposed to the sketching. You're exposed to the hard skills. But you're not really exposed to how the world works. And so I always tell like budding students, I'm like, get yourself out there, talk to people, get a little uncomfortable, but like still keep pushing, ask questions, and like continue nurturing those relationships, because that gets you very far. That shows you what you don't know. So you know what you don't know. That's what I meant to say, yes.
To piggyback off that, I think also it's key to not pigeonhole yourself. I think I didn't study what I do now, and you can change. You can learn new things. You can prove yourself. You can acquire new skills, and you can kind of design a career that you want in real time, which is really valuable.
Yeah, I agree with everything stated so far. Don't have a ton to add. Yeah, don't be afraid to take risks. Good things happen when you do that. Some bad things too, but they're probably not terrible. And the bad things that happen are never as bad as they seem in the moment, and the good things that happen are usually better than you even realize.
Yeah, I like the risk thing, right? When you're young and you don't have that much responsibility to other people in your life, it's a perfect time for those risks. And yeah, I think that's good advice for sure, especially in this world.
Can you give an example of this?
Like moving to Alaska to work on something specific to, you know, like getting outside of your comfort zone, basically. It's taking that chance, or, you know, taking a chance at a startup, or, you know, really kind of putting yourself out there as far as the experience versus it being a kind of a monetary career move, right? And like that's the type of risk I'm talking about.
Or if you do need like the corporate salary, you know, to live, maybe try doing something on the side while you're young and you have more time. Start something. Put yourself out there. It's going to be weird, uncomfortable, a little vulnerable, you know, all that stuff. But, you know, find ways to take those risks, even if you need the money of a corporate job.
I think that gets us into fake it till you make it.
Totally.
That's been a big lesson for me.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm getting really detailed again. How important do you think the accuracy actually is in 3D printing over like the speed you get when it comes to getting a product out? I have one example. We used to print small parts for e-bikes for our end consumers, and just having the chance to like ship them out the next day was so much more important than it being one well off or not at the end of the day.
I guess that gets back into like the accuracy of what's the information you're looking for, right? Like I think a lot of times we talk about whether a prototype is, there's the prototypes you have for they're functional, or looks like and works like, right? And so like those are two totally different sets of requirements to them. And I think understanding the right process for each of those is the name of the game ultimately.
I always like to go back to this triangle. I don't know who told me this. I think it was or maybe it was when we were starting out at Make Lab and I was just trying to figure shit out.
Did you make it up?
No, it's actually a thing. It's like a triangle of like service and quality and expectations. So the triangle is like speed, price, and quality, and you can only attain 2 at any given time. And so that's how we train everybody at Make Lab, is like each material, each speed, you have your caveats. So do FDM, it's quick and dirty, but it's not going to be the best quality compared to like resin or, something else. But I think early stage, you can go pretty cost effective and just rough, draft style. But then as you get closer and you need precision, then you need to go precision, which may either be super costly and fast, or slow and more affordable. Yeah, I got lost in my own triangle.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think what we say here is that, I think the important thing is to really understand what you're trying to learn from any given prototype, and know that it doesn't need to be perfect and doesn't need to do everything, right? Like every product is complex and has multiple criteria that you might need to meet. And in any given iteration of a prototype, you might only need to figure out 1 or 2 of those things. And that kind of iterative process is what ultimately gets you where you need to be. But if you wait until everything is kind of like nailed down, or you think it is, and you build at that point, sometimes it's really hard to distinguish like what's working and what isn't. Any last questions? Maybe one more?
Great job, guys. It's excellent. It's good to hear. I was curious everybody's opinion about, we're talking about these more advanced technologies and democratizing design. So we're putting these technologies in the hands of everybody. I think that's sort of what we're talking about. So is there a possibility that the technology is advancing past the skill set of the people using it? So for example, you can have a 6th grader printing stuff. Is it really, a good design? It's the technology seems to be advancing past our skill set. So we're designers. So we're talking about prototyping and learning, and we have experience, and we have design skills, and we're using these techniques to do that. So if we're all of a sudden talking about mass producing or on small scale, just making something that anybody can just make, who doesn't understand how to design. Just because I can create a 3D file and I can make a few thousand of these things and put them out there, is that maybe not a good idea? We need to kind of keep everything together so we have the skill set, so when we're producing these things, there's the quality. It's like it's going faster than the skill set of the people producing these things. I just think that's kind of an interesting thing. Go ahead.
I think democratizing these tools has a risk of devaluing good design. You hear the word design being thrown around all the time. I hear it in additive. They're like, oh, I designed this part. It's like, no, you engineered a part. It's different, And so I don't know what the right steps to correct that narrative is, but I see it outside of the industrial design, or just the design industry a lot. Like, people would call shapes and colors design, but not usability. they totally undervalue the usability aspect of a part, or the function of a part, which is, again, usability, or the human aspect. And so it's something I see and I'm kind of a little wary of, and I hope I'm not right that it's trending in that direction, but I don't know.
I mean, I put partially that responsibility on us as professionals in the field to give back to those that are learning, basically. I think you're right, and I agree that I think more than likely where we're at right now, we're going to see a lot of garbage, but we need to stop that, right? We need to make sure that education is there early on as well. We're probably too late because the tools are there, but acknowledging that that's the case is what should drive design education. Like, why do we have to wait until high school or college even to realize that design is a thing? You know, that shouldn't be the case anymore. I think that wraps up today's session. So thank you all for your time today. If you want to revisit this discussion or share it with others, I did mention we'll be posting a recording on our website in about a week with a summary. And I don't know. I think we have a little bit of a post. Do we have some time after this? Or is this okay? Cool. We have a little bit of a, post panel time that we can do a little networking and chatting. Did I lose my? Oh, you already moved it for me? Thank you so much. I'm gonna get up again so I can read this. So yeah, join us for our next salon on Tuesday, March 12th at 5:30. It'll also be in person, and we'll be co-hosted by. Sorry, the ice machine is going on. It's really annoying. I'm gonna wait a second. So it'll be co-hosted by furniture company Vitra, which has supplied a lot of the furniture that's in our studio. We'll be discussing the changing ways that offices are redesigning their physical spaces to accommodate hybrid working and new ways of creative collaboration. So you can check out our website and register today for March 12th. Thank you all again for coming. Thank you to our panelists. This has been great.